Good evening and good morning to you all, Chaps and Chapettes. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Guitar Geeks Podcast. If you're watching this on Spotify, thank you for tuning in once again. If you're watching this on YouTube, welcome to this ugly mug once again. Make sure you check it out on both platforms and drop it a follow so you make sure you get up to date with the latest episodes. Today, I have a long-time friend of mine who I have known for a good coming up to 10 years or so now. We have played all across the UK with one another, and it's an absolute delight having him because he's a massive gear nerd, just like myself. So this is going to be a wonderful conversation. Paul Whiting, welcome to the show.
What's up, dude? Thank you so much for having me. This is really kind of uncharted territory for me. I've never done anything like this, and I feel like I'm at work more than anything because it's like this is what I do all day. I just speak to people on video calls, so this is kind of like what I'd love work to be, because I have to talk about work shit, and it's kind of nice to talk about things that are interesting. So yeah, I'm raring to go, man. This is cool. This is so cool.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you, as I say. So for those of you or for those who aren't aware of you, who are you and what do you do?
I would imagine most people out there don't actually know who I am, apart from the small kind of cross-section of society that may have been to one of our gigs at some point. So, well, my name is Paul Whiting, obviously. Some of you, and Josh, when we first met, you kind of knew me by a different name, Frank Durst. So this all kind of came from the UK tribute scene. And I'm a guitarist. I've played guitar since I was 14. I'm 41 now. I know you wouldn't think it to look at me. If I take my hat off, I've got less hair than you do. So we need to discuss this at some point as well.
I'm not far behind.
That's a surprise. Yeah, so I've played guitar since I was 14 years old. Been in multiple bands over the years, and where you and I met was through the tribute scene. Started up in a Limp Bizkit tribute band back in 2010 called Stiff Bizkit, which kind of started off as a bit of a joke, as you would expect. It was a bit of a joke, a bit of a what if, wouldn't it be funny if, and it kind of blew up into the monster it became from there. So yeah, that's kind of it in a very, very, very small nutshell, but there's quite a lot to unpack in all of that. So and it's funny actually, because you mentioned before we kind of went on air that when you were going to struggle to call me Paul Whiting as opposed to Frank Durst, and the story of Frank Durst is quite funny in the fact that it was your singer from Ramlide that actually gave me that name.
Yeah, it was Martin, wasn't it?
Martin walked into we were playing a venue. Oh man, we were playing a venue in it was Colville actually.
Oh yeah.
It was the Mocksters of Rock Festival.
Yes.
at the biker pub. Forget the name of that place, but he kind of wandered in. I'm almost certain it's there. If he's listening to this, he's probably going to correct me, but he kind of walked in and just looked at me and kind of went, "Oh, you're that Frank Durst guy." And I was like, "Frank Durst, that kind of works." So I probably, I don't know, stupidly or whatever it was, changed that to my name on Facebook, on social media, and unfortunately that it kind of stuck. And we got to a point where people actually thought my name was Frank Durst. I was like, come on, there's coincidences in this world, but the coincidence that my name is actually Frank Durst and I'm in a Limp Bizkit tribute band, that's just...
It got to the point of when we were at shows, and I'll go, Frank, and you just ignore me. And I was like, oh yeah, Paul.
But it's funny because the guys in the band that's what they knew me as. They just knew me as Frank all the time, and it was so fucking stupid. It was like, I've got this weird nickname that's just come out of this thing, and now there could be a lot of people out there that think I'm Frank Durst. So yeah, but yeah, man, that's how we know each other. That's sort of it's and the rest is history. It's like we said at the start of this. It's been a long time since we last saw each other. I think I dread to think the last show we actually played together.
The last show I think we probably played would have been the Roadhouse in Birmingham, because we were on, it was you guys, us, then Corn again, because obviously Martin walked off halfway through the show and I ended up having to sing the rest of it. And I think that was the last show that we played together, I think.
Right. Yeah, quite possibly. It's weird, the timelines and all that stuff, it's so blurred now. It's like a lot's happened in the last kind of 10 years, that, you know, more than 10 years now, in fact, because I mean, we originally put the sort of start of Stiff Bizkit was put together in like 2010, at the end of 2010, like I said, just as like a joke. So it's yeah, pretty crazy stuff, man. So but it's been a fun ride.
We first met, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was at that venue in London, the Voodoo. It was
Voodoo Rock in Islington. Yeah,
it's
like the old, like it's an old warehouse down there.
Yeah, because it was a clusterfuck, as they called it. I remember trying to get us, Corn again, and obviously Stiff Bizkit and all the Ramlight guys into this bloody dressing room that was about the size of a shoebox with God knows how many drum kits and guitars. It was just mad that night, absolutely mad.
And it was, and if you remember rightly, the way that venue's laid out, it was kind of the side of the stage. You had the dressing room behind you, but then the side of the stage you had basically like unisex toilets.
Yeah,
and it was a fucking mess in that place. But it was awesome. I mean, that's one of the best crowds we ever played to. I mean, it was just nuts. It was absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I remember we went on, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning or something stupid like that, and the crowd was just nuts for the entire night. It was great.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely. Good times.
Reminiscing.
Damn good times. Yeah. Absolutely.
So we'll talk more tribute stuff as we get into the conversation. So, Paul Whiting, you know, how did, you know, the guitar come into your life? Was there specific things from the childhood that, you know, you can kind of remember and that pinpointed where I want to be like Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Van Halen or what have you?
I mean, everybody wants to be like Hendrix, right? No, it was, I mean, for me, I guess if you're talking what sort of first turned my ear to kind of, you know, the music that eventually led me to want to pick a musical instrument, so guitar up, was I was thinking about this the other day, and I was actually like, do you know what? I'd probably peg it on Ugly Kid Joe before anything. And the only reason I say that is because I remember being, man, I must have been like 10, maybe 11 years old, something like that. And a friend of mine had a cassette. And this is how far back I go. This, like, a friend of mine, you know, do you remember cassettes, Josh?
I do, yes.
Oh, there you go. That's cool. Nice. Some people listening to this might not, but that's fine. We can do a whole session on cassettes and, and all that kind of stuff. So he had a cassette of, it was like I don't think it's a full album. It's like an EP that Ugly Kid Joe released called As Ugly As They Want to Be. And it was, I think that's the thing that, I don't know, I can't remember what it had on it, but it had a song on there called Madman, I think. And it was just, I remember hearing it and being like, that's different. Well, you know, this is quite a, you know, it's not aggressive by today's standards, but back then it was like, okay, this has got a bit of edge to it. But at 11 years old, I didn't really sort of think, oh, this is anything. But then it was actually probably when I was at school, there was kind of you kind of had the groups of people at school that, you know, got into music and listening to what was popular at the time. And you had, back then you had kind of people that were really getting into kind of Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, all that kind of stuff. You know, there was the grunge stuff. There was still people listening to Nirvana then, and stuff, like, you know, when Nirvana was still pretty sort of niche or whatnot. Obviously isn't anymore. A lot more kind of became a lot more mainstream, but back then it kind of wasn't. And you know, you sort of started to take interest in that. And I had a couple of friends at school that played music, played guitar, and you know, I kind of started listening to some of that stuff, and that sort of evolved into listening to Guns N' Roses, and then Slash was pretty cool. I remember thinking, Slash, you know, he's a pretty cool guy, but it didn't really turn me on to wanting to play. It was actually the first time, and I don't remember how or why, but the first time that I heard Cliff Burton play a bass, right, was, you know, I'm listening to, I forget what it was. It must have been like something off Kill 'Em or maybe Puppets. I've got no idea, but I remember hearing Cliff Burton play a bass for the first time and hearing the sound that he was making with this thing. And, you know, it's common. I mean, I've heard it from some of your other guests and stuff. It's, you know, you sort of hear it and you kind of do that thing where you go, I don't know what that guy's doing, but I want to do that.
Yeah.
Whatever that guy's doing, I want to do that. So it evolved from there, really. And that was when I was like 14, I was 14. And I remember seeing a video somewhere. And I mean, I don't know how I would have done it at that time, because again, showing my age, this is sort of long before the advent of YouTube and everything in the world being so accessible like it is now. You actually had to do the legwork and go out and find kind of videos and bootlegs and God knows what else. So, and at the time I didn't have MTV or anything like that, so I wasn't watching on there. But I remember watching a video of it was Metallica playing For Whom the Bell Tolls, a festival called Day on the Green, like sort of 1986 or something like that, and just watching.
Was that the one that was done in the Milton Keynes Bowl? I'm not sure if it was.
No. This is a festival. This is a festival that they used to have in. I'm going to say San Francisco again. Somebody will probably correct me, but it's an American festival, and it was called Day on the Green. And it was a video of them playing bells, For Whom the Bell Tolls. And at the start, Cliff does like a little kind of intro solo thing. And I just remember to this day, just watching him do that. And like, I was like, right, I don't care where I go in my life, what I end up becoming, but I'm going to fit this in. That's going to be part of my life. What that guy's doing, I want to be able to do that or something similar. So, whereas a lot of people kind of, when they first start playing music, that, I'd say 9 times out of 10, their heroes are going to be guitar players, right? Because they're the kind of ones where the focus is. But for me, it was a bass. It was this guy playing bass. It was like so different, like nothing I'd ever heard. It was like, right, okay, how do I do this? So I remember, similar to everybody's story, getting a bass for like my birthday or something stupid that year. And the first, I got a bass, I got a little amp, and the first thing I decided, I was like, right, okay, I've got that. I need to get a distortion pedal for this. Cliff uses distortion. I've got to get distortion. So I remember getting that, having absolutely no idea what I was doing, not putting any time into learning how to play the thing, just literally picking it up and going, right, okay, I'm going to make some noises and see what happens. And yeah, it kind of went from there, really, man. And it kind of shaped me into what I became and the sort of gear nerd that I've become over the years. I'm probably not as much as a gear nerd as yourself and some of your other guests I've heard on. I've not got a good enough memory for that kind of stuff. I never know what stuff's called. I kind of go, well, this guitar or that amp, and it's got these letters in the name and stuff like that, but I know it does this and that and the other. So it's yeah. But it was an interesting start anyway. It was bass, and then over time, probably a couple of years later is when it kind of transitioned over to guitar and started playing in bands and stuff.
She's sort of in the sort of like the 90s when there was that like very early progressive movement, because you started to get into things like Fear Factory, didn't you? So that obviously became a fair bit of an influence, which is a band that I guess kind of it doesn't go under the radar, but it's not a name that's kind of synonymous with learning about guitar and heaviness, so to speak.
No, dude, Fear Factory was, you're right. It was, and good memory as well for remembering I like Fear Factory. Well, that was a big influence. But yeah, it was, when probably not straight away, but certainly a little while after Demanufacture came out, and hearing that, as sort of back then it was, you had to go out and find stuff. So
such an aggressive album. I much prefer the stuff that from like Fear Factory, Meshuggah to Pantera, for example.
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah. And it was I liked the sort of, this was sort of back before that kind of sound was quite, not saying it became that common, but it became a lot more common. A lot more people became influenced by, not necessarily Fear Factory, but the idea of using a 7-string in the way they were, and the kind of real staccato kind of riffs and stuff like that. It didn't really exist prior to that. There wasn't much out there. And, when it came along, it was such a new sound and a new way of sort of looking at guitar. And back then as well, the idea of having an extra string, it was like, wow, never thought of that. That's a cool idea. Obviously, Steve Vai had kind of been doing it years before, and I was aware of him. But when you first heard sort of Fear Factory, and you hear that opening track on Demanufacture, and the way Dino played the guitar and the way he still plays the guitar is just still,
monstrous.
Absolutely monstrous. You're right. I like that word. Yeah, it's cool.
I was chatting to Rabia about we was chatting about Meshuggah, because obviously everybody, as soon as you mention Meshuggah, they always tend to go to like Obson and Bleed, particularly off that album. For me, I think their shining album is Colossus, and like you got tracks like Demiurge and Don't Look Down. Oh my god, they are like gold mines of riff and power.
It's crazy. So Meshuggah are one of those bands for me that like they're kind of, you know, they're a bit Marmite. Meshuggah. It's sort of because I think that, you know, the first time I heard Meshuggah was when I first started hearing and kind of understanding and realizing that there was this other sort of thing going on. And I know people talk about like the birth of gent and all that kind of stuff, and I don't really, you know, gent's just a sort of a thing to me. It's never been like a, and I know a lot of people sort of in that kind of scene that don't like that term as well. It's really funny. It's like, no, we're not gent, you know, we're not gent or whatever the hell you want to. But Meshuggah is one of those bands that it kind of bridges the gap between listening to things like Fear Factory and then getting more into kind of progressive kind of tech sort of stuff, because obviously, you know, they use kind of you know, they use all the kind of polyrhythmic stuff and things like that, which is it's a bit of an acquired taste actually. And I find a lot of people get with Meshuggah a kind of you know, that they've only got like a limited sort of time frame that they can listen to it. They kind of go, right, okay, I can only listen to maybe 3 songs, and then I get to the point where I just want to be able to tap my foot in time to something and not have to be like doing maths in my head when I'm listening to it. Do you know what I mean? It's like a mathematical equation, and you're like, oh, okay. Cool.
It's like saying like I could probably listen to like say Colossus. I can easily probably listen to that album, but like one I always kind of struggle with in that sort of, I wouldn't say it's progressive, but that heavy genre was Strapping Young Lad, because obviously they were around that time with Fear Factory and Meshuggah. But Strapping Young Lad is just so intense. I can only take 3 or 4 songs at a time before my head's just like, I need to lie down.
Yeah. Metal's a bit like that though, isn't it? I think in general, it's unless you're kind of like an out and out metalhead, like you don't really listen to other genres. Other genres don't really speak to you or appeal to you. I think if you're not fully invested in sort of metal as an overall genre, it is hard for people to kind of listen to it consistently. It's quite funny actually, because and you know, my sort of friends and whatnot that metalheads will hate me saying this, but as I've got older, I've kind of started to slip into that a little bit. It's like metal is, to me, is like the kind of is sort of like the catalyst behind everything that I've ever done with music, is the reason I play music, you know. But I find that as the years have gone on, it's like I've started to sort of branch out into other things and listen to other stuff, you know, and kind of take influence from other stuff. And it's funny actually, because and that's one of the reasons I sent you the demo that I did, just to sort of illustrate that in a way, in the fact that over time, you know, I've kind of started, and I've always found that when I write riffs, when I write anything on a guitar, I naturally seem to gravitate back to metal. I can't help it. It just sort of happens because I've been so used to doing it. But I wanted to try something that, you know, and people don't know what I'm talking about yet. They have absolutely no idea basically who I am, let alone what I'm talking about. But I'm hoping that, you know, at some point everyone can sort of hear the stuff that I'm writing and recording. But I wanted to kind of, there's a lot of things that I started listening to sort of over the years that have kind of influenced what I'm trying to write now. And what I'm trying to write now is, I think, what I've always wanted to get to, is to incorporate all of these different things and kind of, you know, put it into a blender and see what comes out. And I know that's quite a common thing these days. People go, oh, I take influences from here, there and everywhere. And I always hear that and I go, oh, that's interesting, but how would you actually apply it? But then I started writing this stuff and going, I'm not going to be afraid to put, like, you know, some weird kind of you know, orchestral stuff in there or whatever, you know. It's, as an example, it's kind of funny when you start messing about. It's a rabbit hole, man. It's a very deep rabbit hole.
But that's where you have bands that do become well, I would say they do tend to make it, because we'll always have something different that isn't out there that people go, oh, well, that's something that we've not heard before. And I think that's where now the progressive thing's really starting to, I would say, take off, because the like instrumental stuff now is kind of more, I would say, widely accepted in a way. Because of bands that have sort of come before that, as it were. I always noticed when I started to, well, when I say started to, when I would always try and come up with riffs, I would naturally go towards something thrashy, like, you know, like Creeping Death style, or, you know, Whiplash or whatever. But now it definitely becomes like I have to sit down and I'll come up with something and go, hold on, what time signature is that? And I'll there trying to physically work it out. And I don't know how that's just come across. It's just happened, as it were.
Do you think part of that is, you know, I guess I know that you're quite heavily influenced by like what Rabir does and stuff now. I know you've sort of mentioned that. So I think without answering that, I think it's sort of answering it for you. It's like, I think it just naturally happens, doesn't it? You kind of, I kind of obsess over stuff. Like if I start listening to a particular artist or, you know, band or collective or whatever it may be, if I get really into what they're doing, I kind of obsess over it to the point where I want to try and write something like that. I go, I like that.
I'll put my hand up to that. I'm exactly the same. Like when I first come across obviously Rabir and Tosca, I was just like, binge this. And I remember that was just like solid what I listened to for like 6 months. And then obviously that led me to other routes. And you do just kind of become obsessed with this just one particular, you know, organic material, so to speak.
It's funny, isn't it? You know, so going back to what, and it will become more relevant when people sort of hear the kind of what I'm writing. I'm doing other stuff very similar to it. The idea being that I'm going to try, hopefully in 2021, to kind of put out like an EP of stuff, probably instrumental. I don't really know yet. I want to kind of move outside of the boundaries of, you know, being in a band. I want to just kind of have some sort of collaboration with people, whoever that may be. You know, it could be singers, it could be pianists, it could be guitarists, drummers, whatever it may be. I just want to kind of come up with like a body of music and go, right, okay, that's my take on it. That's kind of how I want it to sound. But I'd love to be able to like put it out there to whoever, you know, in sort of like, I don't know, put it out on social media, something like that, and say, right, okay, here's a body of music. I want people to come in now that have got ideas of stuff that they can kind of contribute to that and just make it something different or make it better. And that would be people like yourself. And I don't know, there's so many people out there and just so you're sort of like, you become sort of limitless with it more than anything.
I was listening to Devin Townsend's podcast a couple of weeks back, and he was talking about when you did deconstruction with the Devin Townsend project, and he was saying currently that he's working on a project where he's just come up with like a bog standard like riff and drums, and he sent it out to people and he said, I don't care what you do, just do what you want and roll with it. You know, it doesn't matter if it's in the wrong mode or whatever, just do what you feel works. And it's going to be quite interesting to see how that kind of works, especially with what Devin's mindset is like. It's mad. So we've spoken like Fear Factory and then also the Cliff Burton. So kind of where did the Limp Bizkit influence then start to creep in, and the idea of Stiff Bizkit start to roll?
No pun intended there, by the way. Where did it start to roll?
Hey,
you did it. Do you know what? Limp Bizkit, I've said this to people before, but I've never been a massive Limp Bizkit fan to start with. I've never been. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy, isn't it? It's like I've never been a massive. You know, I like Limp Bizkit, love listening to them. Don't have a bad word to say. Well, I say that. You know, there's probably a few bad words, but I've never been massively into it. And you know, if somebody, you know, when I first picked up a guitar or started listening to music, kind of, I became aware of Limp Bizkit like back in like '97 when they released $3 Bill and stuff. If somebody said to me, "You're going to be in a tribute band singing," like, you know, impersonating Fred Durst one day, I'd have been like, yeah, what drugs are you on and can you share some with me, kind of thing. Never thought I'd do it. You know, vocals was never, I mean, I was in a, you know, the first kind of band that I played guitar in, I was a vocalist in that band, but it was that was sort of more out of necessity than choice, really. It was just kind of, I was the only option out of the four of us that could get anywhere near doing something that was passable. So, but the Limp Bizkit thing was, it's funny actually, sort of predating Stiff Bizkit beginning. And again, people aren't going to care about this, but I like to tell this story because it's quite weird how it happened. I was in the United States in 2000. I was in Florida, and there were a couple of, in fact, there were three things happened while I was there that involved people mistaking me for Fred Durst, genuinely mistaking me for Fred Durst. And, you know, because that's one of the reasons that I was kind of selected to do it, because I bear a passing resemblance to the man. So we were in Florida back in 2000. And the first instance was we were in an arcade, just kind of wandering around this arcade in Orlando. And out of nowhere, these three Spanish girls just came up to me, and one of them just slung her arm around me, and the other got a camera out and was just taking a picture, like really, really excited. And they were speaking in Spanish, had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. I was taken by surprise, had no idea why they were doing it. And they just kind of walked off. And I remember just standing there like, I don't know what just happened. I have no idea what happened. You know, didn't make any connection to it then. And then a few days later, we were at one of the theme parks, and I ended up on the same roller coaster as Mick Foley, of all people, of WWE fame, or WWF at the time fame, Mankind, Cactus Jack, dude, love that guy. And it was a really random thing. I ended up on the same roller coaster as him. He was in the queue and he got on, and I got off of the ride, and I was like, there's no way I can leave this park without getting a picture with Mick Foley. He's, at the time, I was in the height of my wrestling fandom, man. I was like, I've got to meet this dude. You know, I'm in the same place. There's no way. I will regret it for the rest of my life. So I kind of waited at the end of the sort of exit area, and sure enough, he appeared, and he came up, and he was, you know, he was very sort of cordial and stuff like that, really nice guy. And I just went, Mick, big fan. I know you're with your family, but can I just get a quick picture? And he just looked at me. He didn't even do that. He just looked at me, pointed at me, and said, "Fred Durst, Limp Bizkit, right?" And I was like, "Huh? What?" Genuinely, no shit. It's a completely true story. And then the third time, we were standing outside the lobby of the hotel we were staying in, and someone we were with had gone to get the rental car to drive round and pick us up. And I'm waiting outside, and the main road that ran past the hotel was pretty close to the entrance. And this car full of like lads just went past, and they were all just leaning out the window, just screaming, giving it the horn, screaming Limp Bizkit at me. And that's when it all kind of clicked and came together. And I realized what those girls were doing. They genuinely thought I was Fred Durst, right? So fucking weird story. So roll on 10 years. Okay, that all happened. That became just a funny story that I occasionally told people. Roll on 10 years. I played in the originals band for sort of most of the noughties, should we say, with a mate of mine called Neil. And that kind of dissolved sort of about 2008, something like that. You know, and we said, oh, at some point we'll probably get together and do another project or whatever. And interestingly, he started working for Andertons in Guildford, you know it well. Yeah. And he was working with another guy called Will. And the story goes that at some point they had they obviously knew a lot of people in Andertons that were doing tribute bands, functions bands, all these kinds of things, and making a little bit of money off it. So they were like, you know, what could we do that isn't out there that would be really cool? And the idea was that, you know, why don't we start a Limp Bizkit tribute band? You know, as a joke, a bit of a laugh. Let's just get together, learn some songs, and see what happens. Okay, fine, cool. So we've got the guitar, we've got the bass, we've got a guy that we know can play drums for us. Now we need somebody that, again, bears a passing resemblance to one Fred Durst. So they contact me, and they were like, "Do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not a singer. I kind of like Limp Bizkit, you know, everyone does, but you know, everyone does. Bizkit is Bizkit, it's party band." So I was like, "All right, fine." So we had a few rehearsals, learnt a few songs. It seemed to go okay, and we ended up playing. It was our drummer at the time, James, shout out to James if you're listening. You're probably not, but I'm going to send you a link and force you to do it. But it was his girlfriend's birthday, and they had her birthday party was in like a football club around our area, and we just turned up and did a set, and it went quite well. There are videos of it out there, but it's quite embarrassing to watch back now because we did get quite a lot better through the years. And that was it. It just kind of happened like that. It was, that happened. And then I think because of the connections that our bassist at the time, Will, had via Andertons and stuff like that, he just started sort of putting the word out that there was a Limp Bizkit tribute act on the scene, going to all the different venues that book tribute bands, and suddenly all these bookings started rolling in with like little or no effort.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow, this is appealing. You're not playing your own music, and that's the thing with tribute. It's, there's very, very little, if any, opportunity for sort of creativity, isn't there, as you well know. But it's kind of funny with tribute. It's like it gives you a very, very small insight into the world of being in a band like that is well established and has a big worldwide following.
It was quite weird for me because my first band was Bramlide. I'd never gigged before. I'd never had a band before. So kind of like jumping into Ramlide, and like the third gig I ever did was, the Legends of Rock Festival. And I was just like, holy shit, what's this all about? And I was chatting to Ad Lucas last night, who is the previous guest to this episode on the podcast.
Oh, you've done it. I was wondering when you were going to get Ad on. I saw that.
Had him on last night. So this episode's been that like 2 weeks after. And we were talking about tribute bands because we were talking about the distinguished, being in a sort of like relatively distinguished band, because obviously he had Multipurpose Chemical and Death Blooms and obviously Korn again and Stiff Bizkit. Mm-hmm. And he was saying, yes, it is very easy to take someone's material and copy it and do it on stage, but it's the nuances that make the difference. With Ramlide and Rammstein, they want the pyro, etc. Stiff Bizkit, they want the hip hop and the gestures and the movements, and it's all those little things that people don't necessarily take into consideration that make it what it is.
Yeah, there's a distinct difference between what kind of constitutes covers band and tribute band. There's a lot of going through sort of I was in that band for 7 years, bit over 7 years all told, and we played up and down the country. We played a couple of places in Europe and stuff like that, and you end up playing. We did some of the, I don't know if you guys ever did any of them, the sort of tribute festivals up north. They have one in Preston, one in Manchester.
Yeah, we did Prestwich and
then Festwich as well. And
don't get me started on Festwich, because that gig was a fucking horror show, an absolute horror show.
Oh man, my experience of it was different, but that was sort of the first big gig that we did. But what I was saying was, it's funny. That it's funny how, like I mentioned, sort of like that very small window of opportunity for creativity, and that's where the difference comes in between a cover band and a tribute band. Because again, we've played up and down the country with all sorts of different bands that sort of bill themselves as tribute and stuff like that, but they don't really put in much effort to actually replicate what that band would do. Not necessarily just the sort of aesthetic of it, the appearance of them, but also what they're doing on stage. They've not actually looked at how that band sort of present themselves live, what they do. And I think that's the sort of difference between what you can call sort of a cover band. You might sort of have a passing resemblance and wear some similar stuff and play the songs as close to the album as you can, but I don't think that's enough to call yourself a tribute band. I think you have to bring in that kind of that sort of artistic element that you have as your own sort of self as a musician to actually make it genuine. And ultimately you're out there to give people the experience of actually seeing that band, aren't you? Because and that's a lot of times that people will come and see a tribute band, is because it's either that band doesn't exist anymore, or that they've never been or would never be in a situation where they would be able to get and see the band for real. So you kind of, when you're in that, you sort of have a duty to make it as close to the real thing as you can.
We had beef with, well, I wouldn't say we had beef. There was another ReampZone tribute band that from what I believe, they don't exist anymore. Okay. And we always used to poke fun at them because they would try their hardest, bless their cotton socks, but you've seen what ReampZone shows are like, and we tried to replicate that as best as possible. And then there was these guys that they would only play in Yorkshire. They would not play outside of Yorkshire. They would just play that area. They would do like one gig every 3 months, and they wore like suit and ties, and they had completely the wrong guitars. And it's like, and you're calling yourself an authentic ReampZone tribute band. Since when have you seen them perform on stage in a shirt and tie? It's just like, that's not the vibe to go with, and which is where I think kind of where we started to work it. Because it's even like with Stiff Bizkit, it was the stupid little things like the amount of detail that the costumes would go into, especially the West Balling ones, to physically stand out on stage. And some of them that was it Will that played guitar?
Will was the bassist up to a point, and then we had
Harry.
Neil
was Harry
our
Edwards.
Original guitarist. So Neil Freeman was our original guitarist, who I've got to give him a shout out, because his costumes were brilliant. He put in a hell of a lot of effort with the paint and stuff like that, and he still owns it. Actually, he bought I forget the year, but it was kind of 2010 actually, when Wes had his own, I think it was a custom shop Yamaha, like a semi-hollow Yamaha, and it was a fantastic guitar, and he found one and he actually bought it, and that's what he was using to play in Stiff Bizkit, which was great. But you're right, after Neil left, that's when Harry Edwards came along. Of anybody that knows the band, No Consequence. Yeah, dude. Yeah,
and because Colin still plays with them as well, doesn't he?
Yeah. So Stiff Bizkit actually became pretty much
No Consequence.
Sort of 3/5 No Consequence, which mate was absolutely fine with me, because at the time it was Colin playing drums, Tom on bass, and Harry playing guitar. All of them absolutely fucking phenomenal musicians, and I mean Colin especially.
Colin, if you're watching this, hello, you are one hell of a sick drummer, man. Like, I'm not a drummer. I would love to play drums, and I purposely always look forward to his Anderton Sounds like ones, because when he did the stuff like Danny Carey, I was just like, damn, unreal.
That guy was different level, and to have people, and that helped, sort of validate it and get as close to the sort of real thing as we possibly could, because you had a set of incredibly talented and versatile musicians that could take that material and pretty much play it exactly as it was supposed to be. And when you've got that caliber of musician behind you, I'm not a seasoned pro vocalist or anything, but I now understand that to be a confident vocalist, you need to have confidence in who's standing behind you playing the songs. And I really, really had that. And you're right, the attention to detail. I mean, Harry, I think the pinnacle of what, and maybe try and find some pictures at some point after this or whatever, but the pinnacle of what Harry did was he went for the costume with like the kind of the black mohawk, the black face paint with the white detail, and then he actually made the LED goggles that Borland was using for a time.
I remember that.
That was just, when he turned up, he told us he was going to make it, and we kind of knew that Harry's one of these guys that he turns his hand to anything, he can just do it. He's one of these, I hate people like that. It's just, they go, I'm going to do this, and that they're going to do it, and it's going to be fucking awesome. It's not going to be shit. It's not going to be half-assed. It's going to be great. They
don't know how to not give it that 110%. It makes you insanely jealous, and you just like,
it does, but at the same time, it really motivates you as well to do better at what you do, music Absolutely. Or otherwise, because you see people that are just so passionate about what they do, and they put the work in to make it awesome. And that's what he did. And he made that, and we'd turn up playing shows not necessarily outdoor shows, but certainly some of the indoor ones where, you know, you'd have the lighting and stuff, and the mask would go on and you'd have these LED lights. It was just mental. Just that as a small detail just takes it to the next level. Because it's funny you should say about the, you know, you found the other Rammstein tribute band. We had a similar thing. It was only brief, but there was another Bizkit tribute band based in Kent. I can't remember what they were called now, but they started to kind of appear, you know, on different things on Facebook and whatnot. But it was a similar story with them. They only seemed to play in the southeast of England. You never saw them sort of getting shows anywhere else. And I like to think that's because we kind of cornered the market with Limp Bizkit. It's like we kind of came along.
Well, absolutely, because I think, you know, it's like, you know, with Hell's Bells and Let's Step and, you know, all the different tribute bands, is once they, you know, you do corner that market, you know, you become very much established. Like, you know, there's plenty of Queen tribute bands out there, but the ones that you always see that have made it are like Bohemians. You know, you've got
absolutely
so many that just, like you say, corner that market and can't get to that level.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that I was kind of happy that we did the Bizkit thing, because I think if I'd have got involved in a tribute band where it was someone who was a lot more mainstream, a lot more popular, therefore a lot more other bands trying to do the same thing, I think I'd have just become insanely competitive to the point of sort of it not being fun anymore. It would have been like, you know, we've got to get more gigs than them. We've got to do fucking break stuff better than they do it. We've got to kind of do this, that, and the other. And I could see that happening. So it was quite nice that we were sort of for pretty much the entire time I was doing it anyway, we were pretty much the only ones out there flying the flag. So we kind of had the pick of everything, really, venues, the lot, and that was really nice. So yeah, it was a fun ride, man. And
I've always toyed with the idea of starting the 9 Inch Nails tribute, but the amount of detail and precision that you need for something like that, and trying to find the musicians to do something like that, is just
hell of a lot of work, man. Hell of a lot of work.
Exactly. You know, to find people that can do a vast array of different things. And I thought about it, but after all the time and effort I thought it'd take, I was just like, no, I can't be bothered with that.
It's I mean, I had other ideas, like going through the years. I always, you know, one of my biggest influences in music has always been Marilyn Manson. From pretty much as soon as they became, or as soon as their name started to get out in the UK, I latched onto that, and I was like, okay, I need to know more about these. And that was another thing. I was like, that'd be kind of cool to do. But then obviously the guys from, you know, Adam and those guys, and Steve and Lewis and everybody, they decided, oh, we're going to start a Manson tribute band, and fucking hell, they are absolutely phenomenal. Again, just whatever absolutely those guys touch just turns to gold, you know.
Absolutely. Do you remember all the days of when Korn again would rock up with that fucking blue van? I have no idea how that blue van made half of the gigs that thing did.
That was Steve's dad drove it. I mean, you know, obviously we can't talk about what's currently going on, because nothing's going on at the moment. Nobody's gigging, nobody's doing anything at the moment, and it's going to be really interesting to sort of see what, you know, of all of these bands that we're discussing and the tribute thing, how it's all going to kind of, you know, how it's all going to kind of start back up, if at all, when all this is over.
My personal opinion, I think it's just going to skyrocket, because people are just going to want to see live music.
People need to get out there, right? People are absolutely desperate to get out there and just do something. And yeah, I mean, it's quite funny actually, but because before COVID hit, I was talking to Colin, and I was actually going to sort of on a limited basis kind of depth for their new singer, Dan Watson, who's the vocalist in Stiff Bizkit now. So basically, if there was ever going to be any shows you couldn't do, I was going to jump in and do it. And I was kind of excited about that, because obviously I stepped away from it, but it's one of those things. It's, you know, you never quite, I don't know, you sort of accept your decision, but I don't think with music especially, you never quite accept that, you know, you made the right choice in things like that. I mean, I did at the time, you know, I moved away from it just because I felt that I'd got absolutely everything out of it that I could at that point. And, you know, I've got a kind of a young family and stuff like that. And I kind of wanted to sort of spend more time with them. And as you know, when you were doing those sort of shows up and down the UK, it's kind of, if you do a show on a Saturday night, that's your weekend done. It's like, don't think you're doing anything on Sunday.
So pretty much every Friday and Saturday, you know, I was working in a school as a lab tech at the time, and then it was like Monday to Thursday I was doing the job. Then Thursday, you know, straight after work I'd be going home, getting all my gear, then getting the train down to, you know, Gary's when he was living down in Chippenham, not getting there till like 8:30, 9 at night, and then you know, Friday, Saturday traveling, coming back Sunday, and you know, just doing that pretty much every week just became so, I wouldn't say monotonous, but it did definitely start to take the enjoyment away about it. And you know, when things, you know, there was altercations in the band, and obviously I ended up getting removed, and I was kind of like, damn, I really wish I was doing it. And now obviously I dep, and I just kind of wish I was doing it that little bit more now.
Of course.
It makes no difference with COVID and
absolutely, man.
God
absolutely.
knows what else.
It's funny, man. It's sort of funny. It's I listen to, and I always sort of quote something Jim Root said. I watched the Jim Root interview. I think it's on Slipknot did a documentary called Inside the Nine quite a few years ago, where it was kind of the first time they'd done a proper interview with all of them unmasked, and it was kind of wow, you know. And there's something Jim Root said in that interview along the lines of, you know, the guy was sort of, the interview was kind of asking him like, how have you made this work all these years? There's 9 of you. How do you go out on the road and you haven't killed each other? And you know, that he sort of goes through that. But then he made this really interesting point where he said, the hour and a half you're on stage is the absolute shit. The rest of it sucks. And that was it. That was all he said. And that stuck with me for years. And I was just like, he's kind of got a point, actually.
Absolutely. Even in like, you know, we don't, you know, let's be fair, like with tribute bands, you had the things of, you know, you would be staying in travel lodges, you know, or God knows what sort of accommodation if a venue puts you up. And, you know, there were some absolute horrible rough nights, but like you say, that moment that you're on stage, you just kind of make for it. And that's, you know, even in a shit situation. Kind of,
and that's what makes it worth it, isn't it? You know, it was always that kind of, and especially because, and that's, you know, again, that's the beauty of the tribute band, is the fact that you've kind of got a ready-made crowd. You know, you don't have to do the legwork really. You have to do a certain level of legwork, obviously, to sort of get your name out and go, hey, we're a Limp Bizkit tribute band, we're a Korn tribute band, we're out here, come and see our show. And it probably takes a while for people to get the confidence up to sort of realize that you're the real deal and you're not just, you know, wasting their time and money. But so I mean, that in itself makes it worth it, in the fact that, you know, that, but I mean, you probably had it where, I mean, you know, we had some weekends where we traveled to kind of the arse end of somewhere in the north of England, and we'd sort of play in front of a crowd of about 20 people, and it was like, shit, man, I've driven like 5.5 hours, and now I've got to get in the car and drive 5.5 hours home after this.
Absolutely. There's been there's been a handful of gigs where it's been like that, and you do kind of thinking, really, I'm putting this much effort. I remember one of the bad ones. This will come into subject. I remember we were playing the same day as the Manchester City and Wigan FA Cup final, and we were playing on a bill with High on Maiden and not Slip, and we were on first. And the stage was literally, you know, you see that meme of, oh, that's the stage, and it's literally like this box in a corner.
You can fit a bass drum on it, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you could barely fit that on there. And I remember we were playing the gig, and they had the FA Cup final on, and there was literally 2 people that were watching us. Everybody else was watching the FA Cup final. And we went on at something like 3:30 in the afternoon, and it was just catastrophic. I remember, for some reason, the sound guy had no idea what he was doing. I had no sound at all from my guitar through the entire set, apart from the last one, and then the monitor broke, which was fucking like typical. Yeah. And you just think of moments like that, and you're just thinking, why do I bother? And then,
yeah.
you know, the next night it could be fucking brilliant.
but they're the things you eventually look back on and find hilarious and laugh about. You know, at the time it sucks, right? And then you sort of look back one day and you go, that's actually quite funny in hindsight.
Yeah,
Funny.
the funniest moment I can ever recall from on stage was Martin had booked a gig in Bradford, and this is where he was living at the time. And I'll be honest, the booking was done shit because there was about 7 or 8 people in the crowd, and you have those things where everything that could go wrong in a gig does go wrong. It was like you could have easily have filmed it and put it in like as a hilarious thing on YouTube. I remember my wireless for some reason wasn't working, so I changed the battery like 3 or 4 times. I checked the battery and the guitars and it's cutting out. I remember doing one of the solos and you could just hear go blip, blip, and there was this one moment where I can't remember what song it was for the life of me, but Martin was stood there in his power pose like that, and then you could see him and you could see him giggling to himself, and it was like, what the hell's he giggling at? And all of a sudden the smell hit us, and he had ripped one of the worst farts I've ever smelt in my life. And
stage farts are a thing, dude. And absolutely,
it got to the point of the crowd took about 4 or 5 steps back from the stage. Yeah, you could see Doug on the other side with his vest over his nose like that. Gary's at the back drumming like that, carrying on drumming with his shirt over his head. Martin's still there giggling, and the side of the stage where I was the stairs to go down to the dressing room, and I've walked down the stairs just to the range where my wireless was working, and I could just about see the rest of the band. It was just fucking hysterical.
That's when wireless comes into its own, because someone farts on stage, man, you just go somewhere else. Just go to the bar, go outside, do whatever. Everybody's got the horror stories. There's a couple that come to mind.
I was going to say, share a couple of your horror stories and your good moments.
Okay, so if we start with the bad, we played. I think there's been a few bad, but the ones that I'll get off this and I'll go, oh shit, yeah, I didn't tell him about this. But I remember we played in. It was the first time we'd played anything in Europe, and we got invited to play this festival in West Germany, sort of northwest Germany, called Toll Rock. And there's a tribute festival, and we so Pete, our DJ at the time, Pete, my mate Pete,
I remember Pete.
You remember Pete, of course. We drove over there in his we fucking drove to Germany in a Renault Clio, and it had no air conditioning. It was about 100 degrees the entire way. We ended up taking a wrong turn and ended up driving round and round in circles in Brussels for about an hour and a half. And that was horrible, man. We ended up getting out of Brussels and we carried on sort of, and when you get into Belgium, the road to Germany is all told pretty much a straight line. You can't really deviate and go too wrong, but we did. So that was the first part. And then we eventually got to the festival site, and overall the gig went fantastically. I mean, the production was so pro, and they had a great crowd there and people, and we got paid quite a decent amount of money for it as well, so I can't complain. But we got up on stage to start, and we'd sound check, everything went fine in the sound check, no problem. We get up on stage to start, and we're doing like the final kind of line check before we kick off, and they had like this side stage with some steps, and I'm standing behind it with a wireless mic, sort of waiting to get up there, like warmed up, ready to go. And Colin at the time was using an electronic like sample pad. I think he was just doing it for some like sub bass drops he was going to put into some of the songs, and they could not get this fucking thing working. Just, it didn't matter what they were doing. But because the guys were German, didn't speak a word of English, Colin was trying everything he'd think of to just stop and say, look guys, it doesn't matter, we don't need it. And it just delayed and delayed and delayed, and we were probably about 25 minutes late going on, and it was already kind of 1:30 in the morning. And the guy that was promoting it, you could just see this guy getting more and more and more angry as time went on. And then we got about halfway through the set, and the wireless mic I was using cut out, refused to work. And again, I had to walk off stage, and these two kind of like on stage kind of help, I don't know, techs or whatever. I was trying to explain to them what had happened, and they just couldn't understand. And I'm hitting the top of the mic going, not working.
It's
and
kaput.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I'd forgotten all the German I'd learned in school, and it was a disaster and all that. But it turned out fine, and it was pretty incredible. But it's in those moments that you just kind of, you think that the world's just falling in around you, and it's kind of not. But
yeah.
And I think the only other one that kind of comes to mind was probably we played another festival called Teddy Rocks, and it was something that a guy did every year. I think it still obviously not at the moment, but it still happens. And they get some pretty decent bands down. And it's down in a place called Blandford, kind of down in Dorset area. I think Blandford Forum is in Dorset, but it's in a field. And we turned up to play this thing, and we were booked to play what they were calling the after party. So they had a massive main stage. It was really cool. I forget what bands In Me were one of the bands that day. Remember In Me?
I
Random.
remember them. Yeah.
And we kind of got a bit of a jokey photo with them at the end, because they thought we genuinely wanted to speak to them, but we didn't. We just wanted to take the piss and get a picture, but that's another story. They had the main stage, but then they had like this side stage right next to the main stage, which was still a pretty decent size. But the weather that day was fucking horrendous. So like the headlining band finished, right? And we're sort of standing backstage on this side stage waiting to go on to start this, what they were billing as the after party. And I'm just like, right, okay, everybody's leaving. And you could just see people just filing out this festival site because it was raining. It was a shit day. It wasn't particularly warm. And there was probably about, I would probably say about 100 people stayed behind, which sounds like a pretty decent amount. But when you're in a field that was probably holding about 6,000-7,000 people, and suddenly you're down to 100, it really notices. So the rest of the band went and got on stage. They started sort of playing the intro to, I don't know, My Generation. I don't even think they got that far by this point. Actually, no, they hadn't, because I could audibly hear Harry laughing at me when this happened. But over the top of the steps that went up stage, there was just this piece of tarpaulin. And of course, during the day, it had rained and rained and rained. And this tarpaulin had kind of warped in the middle, filled up with water. And for whatever reason, if there's a God, he wasn't looking down on me that day, because like, as I walked on the stage, the tarpaulin gave way and the whole fucking lot just came down on top of me. And we've got footage from Harry's GoPro from the other side of the stage. Is facing down on him. You see me come up on the stage, and I'm ducking like this because this water's pouring on me. And Harry's just pointing at me, going, ha, 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 just laughing. Oh man, that was pretty horrible.
I need to try and find that to put it in the video.
I'll when I finish this, any photos or anything like that, a reference, I'll find them for you, and you can kind of punch them in, because they're kind of relevant. And that, unfortunately, the video footage doesn't really show the water coming down on me that well. But
doesn't capture the moment.
It's very well illustrated in the reaction as to what has just gone down. And I was gonna, obviously you asked about really cool moments doing the tribute thing and whatnot, and I don't know if Ad spoke to you about this last night. Did Ad talk to you about the Corn thing where they turned up in Manchester?
Yes.
Right, cool.
We spoke about that.
Big highlight, man.
Absolutely. Like, even when he was talking through the story, you could see the grin on his face. I'm just like, that's just when like, oh, I can die happy now.
I mean, I don't know. Everyone's got their own perspective on that story, but it was incredibly. It was so surreal in the fact that he's probably explained it, but we all knew that Korn and Limp Bizkit were touring. We knew that they were in Manchester a few nights later, so we were like. I don't know, maybe they're around somewhere, maybe they're in a hotel or whatever. And the thing that kind of, it was amazing, but at the time, it's probably the most terrified I've ever been in my life of anything in terms of nerves and anxiety and whatnot. My most vivid memory, more than actually speaking to them, was standing side stage, literally mic in hand, ready to walk out. And at the, oh man, I'm going to test
the Ruby Lounge.
The Ruby Lounge, thank you, dude. Thank you. The Ruby Lounge, when you're standing side stage, there's a corridor that goes down the side of the venue into the dressing room, which is sort of the other side of where the crowd would stand, and the mixing desk. And I'm standing there waiting to go on stage. I've looked over my right shoulder, and Steve, singer from Korn Again, is just bounding down this corridor, literally staring me in the eye. And I'm like, I knew nothing of what was going on at this point. So I thought something was wrong. So I'm looking at him going, all right, he's about to give me some bad news. And he just came up, he said, I know this is the worst time to tell you this, but just so you know, there are members of Limp Bizkit and Korn standing at the bar right now. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm about to go out there and do this. And the worst part of it for us was that night, unfortunately, we didn't have Pete with us, our DJ. So we couldn't sort of do the whole thing. And Colin would probably correct me on this, but I swear that his sample pad that and this is how talented Colin Bentham is, by the way, playing drums. When Pete wasn't available to do the DJ and the sampling, Colin would just literally load all of the samples up onto like a pad, and he would play them while playing drums. He'd play the fucking samples while playing the drum parts. And that blew my mind. But I'm pretty certain that night that wasn't working either. So we weren't able to do the samples, which kind of sucked. But you know, it all turned out great in the end. I was standing and DJ Franco at the time just appeared like right in front of me, and I'm just like, I don't know how to react to you. And Ad will have a slightly different perspective of this, but you know, sort of to tie into what you were talking about with Ad yesterday, when we'd finished our set and we went over to the bar, we were standing with I forget who we were standing with. We were standing with Wes's guitar tech, guy called Cadaver. The tour manager for Korn was there, and Ray Lucia, the legendary Ray Lucia. And fuck me, what a down-to-earth nice dude he is, by the way. Yeah. And Ad is standing sort of, I've got those guys here. Ad is standing facing me, and we're kind of chatting. And into view comes Fieldy. Just, he's fucking there behind Ad. And I was like, Ad, stop talking for a second. I said, brace yourself. I said, turn round. And Ad's looking at me, and he just slowly turns around, spots Fieldy, and his reaction is like, like, you know, just this fucking reaction to, you know, and Fieldy's like, hey, what's up, man? You know, just starts chatting away, whatnot. And they came backstage, we did some pictures with them, and ended up getting guest passes to one of the shows they did in Cardiff we ended up going to. So,
no way.
I mean, that was just an absolute legendary night, dude. That was probably the highlight of the whole thing, you know. The entire time I was doing
it's not a bad highlight to have at all.
It's all right. It's, you know, I've heard of worse. So
absolutely.
And you know, obviously I'd told you all about him getting up and playing a couple of songs with them, which was just unreal, you know. And sort of jumping on stage, and just, I was sitting next to the drum kit by Ray, just filming him, literally as close as I am to my laptop now. He's just there playing fucking Freak on a Leash, and I've just got my phone, like, you know.
I would kill to do something like that with like Rammstein, and just have him come on stage. I think I wouldn't be able to play. I'd just die. I'd just be like,
I think that's what I was doing, because all I remember is that every time Ray turned around and looked at me, he was giving me these really odd looks. But I think I probably was just there with my phone, just going, you know, just like, oh my god, I love you so much.
I can't recall any amazing moments, but I can recall, there's always, when I talk about bad moments, there's always one that particularly comes to mind. And we were doing Festwich in the summer, and the original I can't remember if you played that one year, because Not Slip were pretty much headlining, I think it was. I don't know if you were at that one.
No, Not Slip. I think the year Not Slip first played it, we didn't play it. I think that was the one.
Might have been the one that you missed. And so we'd shacked up in the afternoon, and all of a sudden we got told that we weren't playing the main stage, we were playing the second stage. And so it's like, okay, it's no biggie. And that's because Craig Price from Metallica, I don't know if you know Craig. He's guitarist
/ singer. Is that him?
No, that's Chris.
Chris, of course. Yeah.
he was having to dep for Megadeth UK, and they were on them. They were meant to be on the second stage, and then obviously Metallica on the main one. So they kind of like, well, we'll put them on the main stage. He hasn't got to lug his gear over. So we were now playing after a Pantera tribute. I can't remember the name for the life of me. So we turned up in the Ramline Mobile, as we called it. We turn up and. They were like, oh, we haven't got any of your passes or anything like that, so you got to wait here. It's like, you're fucking kidding me. It's a roasting summer's day. So we're waiting there in the van, like it was me, Doug, Gary, Jax was there, Laura was there, everybody and whatnot. And then eventually we get these passes, but they give us passes that wouldn't allow us backstage at the main stage. So we could only go backstage on the second one, which was fucking stupid. So we were there setting up, and the Pantera guys like, what's going on with the kit? And they were like, oh, it's house kit, breakables. And like, okay, yeah, fine. So that Gary's set up all these fucking breakables and whatnot. And then it turns out Pantera completely stripped the stage of a drum kit. So Gary had to basically build the drum kit in about 10 minutes. He did it. God knows fucking how. And so we got all
and mic'd it up as well. That's impressive. Yeah.
So we got all the stuff on the stage. It started to get mic'd up, and it was like, oh, we got a line check, and they were like, yeah, quick line check because you're meant to be on in 5 minutes. I was like, fuck.
Okay.
So we played, and the guy and like he was literally like in the yonder. It's like, yep, everything's fine.
Yeah.
So of course we hit the intro and we started out with Ramlight, and I remember just this awkward silence of Gary just counting us in, and there was no sequence in the front of house or in the monitors. There was no guitar in the front of house or monitors. All you could hear was just the acoustics of Gary playing. It was like, what the fuck? There was no backing track, there was no clicking areas, nothing. And I remember just hitting that first chord and I was like, what's going on? There's nothing, absolutely nothing. And it took like 3 songs to get any sound. We were playing blind, and it was the worst experience I've ever had in my life. Or you just hear is Gary just acoustically playing, like looking confused. Doug shouted, "What are you doing, you fucking cunts?" And just hit the fucking sound, man. It was just awful. And it turned out they hadn't turned on any of the power or anything like that. And
crazy.
like,
well, I mean, we never, it's funny you should say about the backstage passing, because they had, at those festivals, they had a really strict rule of backstage bands only, and only the band that's currently on or just going on or just come off. You're not bringing anybody else back there, which, and Sarah and Dawn, the women that was sort of running the backstage areas, I mean, they ran a really tight ship and they did a really cool job, but that was always a bit weird to us. It was like, so we can't just go sort of stand in that huge area that's completely vacant at the moment. We've got
after Not Slip, we were just hanging out at literally just as where like the little gate to the backstage was at the main stage, and we was talking to Alistair from Not Slip and Carl, who was the singer, and my missus was there with us. There was Craig and his girlfriend Zoe, and we were all Johnny Doom, and we was all just chatting, and we all got we got ejected because our passes weren't valid. And it's like, are you fucking for real? I'm still in my Rammstein gear and the makeup. I'm not doing it for the fucking sake of it.
I'll tell you, let me quickly tell you, and while you've been talking, it is just jog my memory about actually, do you know what? This is the absolute worst thing that's ever happened to me at a gig, right? So this was Festwich, and I think this was the last time we played Festwich. Not because of this, by the way, it just happened. We were on the main stage at Festwich, and we had a pretty decent crowd. We had a pretty good crowd for it. And I don't remember how it happened, but a few beach balls ended up on the stage, right? So I've decided, in my infinite wisdom, that I'm just going to boot one of these beach balls out into the crowd. Why not? So, and again, there is a video of this. I'm going to have to find this stuff, man. It's somewhere, but I've definitely got it. So I've placed the beach ball down on the stage, and I've stepped back just to like the right of, to the left of where Colin is with his kit. And I've got the crowd just to kind of start going, oh, as I take the run up and hit it. Just a bit of banter, just to be a bit stupid. Anyway, I've connected with this fucking beach ball, hit it as hard as I can, full pelt. The wind has taken it, and instead of going up in the air, it's kind of started to come up in the air, but then it sort of dipped off of the front of the stage. And there's a woman standing front and center, and the ball has literally just hit her square in the face. All right. It was only a beach ball, but I mean, I hit that thing with some force, man, and it really hit hard. And you just, in the video, you just hear me go, oh, like this, looking down at her. And then we had to just carry the set on, and I'm kind of carrying on. We go into the next song, and for the whole next song, I'm literally just looking down at this woman because she's got her friend next to her, and she's got her glasses, and she's looking at her glasses and keeps doing this with her eyes. And I'm like, oh, fucking hell, I've shattered glass into that woman's eyes. Oh my God. And that's all I'm thinking throughout the next song. I don't remember what song we were playing, but I remember doing the song, trying to sort of get into it and just keep looking down. And then after that, I had to just literally get off the stage, walk down and go up to her and be like, are you okay? I'm so. And she was like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry. I'm all right. I'm like, how many fingers am I holding up? That kind of thing. But I think that was the worst because I'd actually, I'd potentially done some pretty bad harm to it.
I'd have fallen over.
I think a few people did. So yeah, but fun times, man. Fun times, and it's good to share stories about that shit.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good memories.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time. So let's talk
Absolutely.
gear
Let's
and
talk
guitars.
a little bit of gear. That's a great idea. Love it.
So
Love it.
I am aware that you have lots of your babies around.
I've got a couple. Yeah. I mean, I've got, so with gear, again, I'm, like I said right at the start, I'm incredibly obsessive over things. So if I decide that it's new guitar time, I won't just kind of go out and try a couple and that's it and make a decision. I will spend hours and hours and hours researching, looking, Googling, watching fucking endless YouTube videos of people demoing gear and God knows what else until I finally, and it drives my wife absolutely fucking mental because, as soon as I tell her, right, I'm getting a new piece of gear, it's like, she's like, okay, right, we've got a few weeks of this now where I'm not going to be able to get anything out of you because you're going to be doing your research. But
my missus has to put up with the same thing. So
yeah, I think that's a man thing generally, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just guitars, it's anything. Cars, DIY gear, you fucking name it. Men are just like, I always use the analogy that men never grow up, the toys just get more expensive. Right.
Well, I said to my missus, well, I was chatting to her and I said, no, men don't grow up, they just simply get bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean. The toys get more expensive. But I mean, guitars, I've owned countless guitars over the years, always trying to find like the perfect thing and never really was able to settle on anything specific until probably 2001. I bought an ESP LTD EC1000, the deluxe, that classic.
I've owned one of those.
Yeah, and I've got the quilted top in red. That's in the cupboard at the moment. But I mean, everybody knows what that guitar is, so it's like everyone goes, yeah, I know that. I've seen that a million times. The Les Paul shape. But in terms of
plot twist, sorry to interrupt. I have got coming possibly tomorrow a 4-knob pre-lawsuit ESP Japan Eclipse coming.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah.
Is that another freebie from Rabir?
No, that's not. It is. That's.
By the way, I hate you.
That's a trade for the Kemper. Yeah, my Kemper. Yeah. So carry on.
When you mentioned that to me yesterday about your story about Rabir, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just like hit him up and just start sharing some of his videos and see what happens. Maybe I'll just
that's
have
a long story, sort of, which if we've got time, we can talk about it. But carry on.
so it's always been pretty standard stuff over the years. I've owned like 3 7 strings. I always wanted to get into playing 7 strings just purely because I wanted to play Fear Factory songs. That's always what it is. I hear a particular band or a type of, something, and I think, right, how are they making that sound? Well, they're using this guitar with these pickups. So I obsess over it. So I'll go, right, okay, I need to get a guitar that's going to do that so I can play these songs. So then I'll go out and buy it. Then I'll move on to something else and I'll sell it and I'll get something new. So I've always been sort of on this sort of path of discovery of, right, I need to find a sort of just a set of instruments, because, guitar players, you can never own just one. It's not possible.
What do you need more than one guitar? Right, how long have you got?
Don't they all do the same thing? It's like, don't get me started. But so I've always tried to find that one thing, and the EC1000 is kind of the thing for me that I bought back in the early 2000s, and that's the one that I've never sold and I would never sell. That's the one that I always say to people, that guitar will go to my grave with me, because it's just perfect. The versatility of those things, and I can never talk up the limited series.
I've got 4 of those now, like literally the 4 guitars I have now. They are going with me till I die.
And I did have and I sold it a few years ago, which I sort of regret now. When I was kind of 17, I bought I could never afford the actual ESP, kind of the ESP version of the Explorer that Hetfield sort of made famous. They were super expensive when I was a kid, but there was I think ESP in Japan, and I might get.
Are you telling me you had an MX2?
The Grassroots.
Yeah,
it's made. Yeah, and you're going to pull one down off the wall, aren't you?
No, but
I honestly thought you were going to grab one down and be like, haha.
I've got a mate that owns one.
Okay.
And an old MX2, and my god, they're gold dust.
Yeah, but this was made by it was like the budget version of ESP at the time, before limited, like LTD came out. They were called Grassroots.
Yeah.
And they made the Explorer, and they made the Hammett signature as well. And I bought the Explorer, and it was considerably cheaper than
my local guitar shop at the moment has a Grassroots Kirk Hammett signature one.
Excellent, love it. Yeah, and they go for quite a lot of money now. But that was they used to have a guitar shop in High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire called Percy Pryor's Music. And that place was like the mecca of, you wanted metal guitars, you went there, and they had fucking everything. Dimebag signatures at the time, things like that. And it's quite interesting, just sort of quickly go off on a little tangent. A mate of mine sent me a link, Neil, in fact, who was the original guitarist in Bizkit, sent me a link a couple of weeks ago. Somebody selling the Hetfield signature ESP Flying V with the red flames. If you remember that was from like the Load Reload
era. The JH1.
The JH1, right? So he sent me a link to that. Somebody was selling one on Reverb, and they were selling it. It had never been played. It sat in the case since it was brand new, and they had photographs of it, and it looked pretty genuine. 15 grand they wanted for this thing, right?
I can top that in a sec.
You probably can. We probably all top that. But the funny part of that story is, I said to him when he sent me that picture, I was like, I still regret to this day that the music shop I just mentioned, Percy Pryor's in Buckinghamshire, High Wycombe, I remember as like a 17-year-old kid going in there, and they had one on the wall, and I remember it was £1,200. I'll never forget it had the price tag on it, £1,200. And I think back and I was like, if only I could have talked my parents up at that point and kind of said, in years to come, this is going to be worth £10,000 plus, get your money out kind of thing. But it's crazy, stuff like that. But go on, give me your one.
There's a Reverb listing at the moment. I don't know if you've heard of them, Essex Guitar Studios.
No.
Or I should say, he is renowned for absolutely overinflating the fuck out of gear. And and he's got on there at the moment. Do you remember the LTD Grinch, the black Viper style with the green?
Yeah, with the green flame. Yeah.
So
baritone.
Yeah, they, don't get me wrong, they're very hard to come by, rare as hen's teeth, and they're no longer made anymore. However, let's be fair, it's an LTD. It's a factory CNC made guitar.
Yep.
And he is asking 50,000 for it. 50 grand for a Korean made factory guitar. And it's like,
keep dreaming, man, keep dreaming.
Are you out of your fucking mind? And his excuse is, oh, the guitar player in Evanescence used it.
Great.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
What's the name of the guitar player in Evanescence? Anybody remember? I've
No.
heard some people, but I don't. Absolutely fucking not.
Everybody knows it for James Hetfield's like 50 grand. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. People always go for that kind of thing.
Mm.
So, I mean, in terms of gear, it's always been kind of like buy one, sell another, buy another two, sell another three, that kind of thing. But I think that I'm sort of at a stage in life now where I've kind of settled on stuff. And in terms of standard off the shelf stuff, I've got the LTD. And last year I bought myself this. I'm going to show you it here. So this is
Spotify users.
Yeah, so Spotify users, you'll see this. So
it's the Jake Bowen.
It's the Jake Bowen signature guitar from Ibanez. It's the JB 10FX, I think is the model, and it's got a couple of Damasio Titan pickups in it, which kind of sold it for me because again, if you want to get into sort of like gear nerd kind of stuff, it's got the guitar. The thing that's nice about it, it's incredibly versatile, like really, really, really versatile. It comes out of the factory drop C as well, so they send it out of the factory drop C, which I kind of like that tuning. Sort of a good leveler for me. But the Titans are it has a 5-way selector, so they split, and obviously you can split it across from the bridge up to the neck. And when you're in the second position, so when you're on the bridge pickup in the second position and it effectively becomes a single coil, it just turns from like a really fucking ballsy metal guitar and it just ends up sounding like a Strat. And it's, for clean sounds, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. And I just heard it and I was like, I have to have that thing. But it's heavy, it's got quite a thick radius on the neck. But it's built like a tank, man, and it just sounds incredible. So the project I'm doing with again Neil, my mate Neil, is is kind of metal, and it's annoying because we kind of started that band up sort of pre-COVID, and it all started to sort of get some legs, and we were writing music, and then COVID hit, and suddenly everything went to shit. So that's sort of the metal side of it. And I guess in terms of gear, guitar wise, I'm going to show you this in a second and explain to the people on Spotify, because it's going to be quite hard to
Spotify users, make sure you check out the YouTube version.
Check out the YouTube channel to look at the guitars and the fucking stupid photos and videos that I'm going to dig out from Josh after this, to embarrass myself a little bit more if I haven't already. So I was quite late in the game getting into the band Reuben, if you know Reuben.
I do not know them.
Wow, okay, cool. A guy called Jamie Lenman, if you know Jamie Lemon. So Reuben are kind of they're not around anymore. They actually split up in 2007, which I can't believe it's that long ago that they split up. But they're more kind of they're more just kind of like sort of standard rocky kind of Helmet sort of sound. They were from that sort of Bring Me the Horizon sort of era and stuff like that.
Helmet, that's a name I haven't heard for years.
Yeah, a lot of it's amazing the amount of bands that are kind of a derivative and sort of steal off the sound of that. But anyway, go and check out Reuben. They released 3 albums, absolutely amazing band, and Jamie Lemon, the vocalist, has gone on to do some really wacky sort of stuff that involves kind of, I don't know, I'm not even going to go into it. So there's a lot of pop elements and stuff in there. But when I listened to their album, I'd always been like out and out metal, real ballsy kind of metal, and I wanted to try and find a guitar that was like, it could cope with metal if it had to, but it was more of just like a traditional, it's just a distorted guitar. It's not anything spectacular. It's just something that you can beat the shit out of, sounds good. And he really inspired me, because all the way through his career with Reuben, and even now, he was using a guitar that he bought when he was 15, which is it's a Yamaha RGX. There's some letters and numbers after that, which I can't remember, but it's a real bog standard Yamaha that probably cost me about 150 quid when he bought it. And over the years, he's just modded this thing, put different pickups in it and stuff like that. So randomly, in the town that I live in, for a very short period of time, we had a little guitar shop. And one day I was walking past, and what do you know? That exact guitar appeared in the window. Never found one on eBay, never saw one anywhere. And it just appeared in the window, 90 quid. I bought this guitar. Well, actually, credit to my wife, she bought it for me for £90, because I went back past the shop one day and it had gone, and I was like, gutted, somebody's bought it. I went home that day, and there it was sitting on my dining room table. So big shout out to my wife. So she does understand. It's fine. She does get it sometimes, even if it does piss her off. But and I've modded the fuck out of this thing, and it's going to look like such a 15-year-old's punk guitar. But if you can see that, it looks really kind of bog standard. Cool. Yeah. Okay. And it's got the classic Yamaha headstock logo as well. So it's basically, for anybody that's not going to watch the YouTube thing, it's basically just a super strat shape. Out of the factory, these things came with 2 humbuckers and a single coil sitting in the middle. So I've blocked all of that out, blocked the trem off. Hate trems, by the way. We could do a whole podcast on why I fucking hate tremolos, by the way. And the pickup in here, which I can recommend if anybody just wants something that is like super versatile, sounds amazing, is the DiMarzio Air Norton.
Yes, I've heard very good things about those.
Yeah, I'm going to expect something out of DiMarzio now, because I've just bigged up their Titan pickups now, the Air Nortons, and
I can't talk because I'm an EMG artist, so I can't talk about.
Oh, you are, aren't you? Yeah, I forget about this. You're flying high these days, Josh. It's unbelievable. But yeah, and I just wanted something that gave sort of a real raw, rocky sound without it being too sort of pretentious or whatever. And that guitar kind of does that. And the demo, which I know you're going to play part of it, that's sort of what I'm recording, the stuff I'm doing now. Sort of going back to that very briefly, through the years, metal's kind of always been my go-to, but I've always been, and I have to give a mention to Silverchair. If you know Silverchair, do you know Silverchair?
I've heard the name briefly once or twice, but I can't say I recall any of the material.
Silverchair were a band, again, they've split up now, or on, as a Wikipedia page says, on indefinite hiatus. They're a band from out of Australia from like sort of 93, 94 they formed, and they were basically the same age as me, like sort of early 40s. And I mean, they wrote some that you can't really describe what their music is or what it became. It started off very kind of Pearl Jam, grungy type stuff, and then it just evolved into something that just became its own thing. It had orchestral parts in it. Some of it was heavy, some of it was quite jazzy, some of it sort of had elements of like this weird sort of lounge kind of sounds in it and stuff like that. Incredibly strange. Yeah, absolutely, really strange. And that's something that sort of shaped what I wanted to do. So I kind of took the idea of that, going, you can add all of this weird and wonderful stuff and still make it cool. And then I took the idea of Ruben, who were a very just raw, just kind of just out and out rock band, sort of along the same lines as it's like Foo Fighters type thing, no fucking about it. It's literally just guitars, drums, and that's it.
Yeah.
And some aggressive vocals, and sort of taking that element, and then as well, I'm quite late to the party with a lot of bands. Enter Shikari being another one. Okay. Like, never really listened to Enter Shikari up until probably about 2 years ago. And
I will be honest, I really don't like them. I'm not a fan personally.
I never thought I would, but I started taking elements out of that, like the idea of using some real kind of like techno-y synths and things like that. I was like, that's pretty cool. And this demonstrates how impulsive I can be. I bought, like, over lockdown, I bought like 2 synthesizers. I've since sold them because I have no fucking idea how to use them, because you get it and it's like a fucking spaceship. Yeah. You're just sitting there just pressing buttons going, I'm sure it's not that complicated.
The best pedal I've bought was when I bought a synth pedal, and an expression that has become such an impressive writing tool. I mean,
yeah, man.
It's like, I guess the feel like the synth element comes, say, from Limp Bizkit, a bit to Fear Factory, because that kind of incorporates from that, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so that's guitars. In terms of amps, I've had all sorts over time, but now I'm kind of like, I'm sort of downsizing, trying to find a way to do things so I've got space. But I've always used modelers. In recent years I've used modelers, and I started out with I've always gone with line 6.
You had the Pod X3 Live, like I used to use, I think.
Pod X3 Live, and then I moved on to the HD 500X, and now I've got the Pod Go. If you've seen this thing,
yes, I have seen that.
Ola Englund did a really cool demo of it, and there's all sorts of demos on YouTube, but it basically takes a lot of the elements from the Helix range and puts it in just a much more compact, stripped down, affordable unit. And I've never been one for like complicated routing of effects loops and all that kind of shit, just because I haven't got the attention span, if I'm completely honest.
I'll go and hide then.
Yeah, fine. I could, again, it's another thing that if I did get into it, I'd obsess over it, and that's probably why I wouldn't, because I would spend more time on that than actually playing the guitar, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. But
I think my pedal board is on like iteration 6 now, or something like that.
Yeah. Oh man, there were days where I was there where I'd have a pedal board and I'd have about sort of 15 units sitting on there of various things, and you'd end up, spending most of the gig like tap dancing across it. And then suddenly multi-effects came out. I was like, I can combine all of these things into one switch. I like that. I like the economy of that. And but the Podgo is incredible. It's a really, really cool unit. It's incredibly versatile. The sounds you can get out of it are just mental. I mean, you can, out of the Ibanez, the Jake Bowen signature, the sound you can get out from metal with that, the way it kind of the way it emulates your sort of classic sort of Mesa cabs and heads and stuff like that. And the beauty of it is you can load in impulse responses as well. And impulse responses, that's a fairly new thing for me, by the way. And I'm like, how did I never know about this before? It's like, oh shit.
I've kind of become like that because since I started using neural DSP stuff, and then I started using all the plugins. Like obviously before with the Kemper, I would just get like whatever cab comes on it, and then I started fiddling about with neural DSP and the impulse responses, and it takes it to another level, doesn't it? Absolutely, it does take it to another level. Like I found that I really like a 57 and a 160, and I tend to have the 57 closed up, and then the 160 a little bit further back to give it that air, so to speak. I love how that sounds now.
Yeah, and I never really knew that was a thing until I started watching. Till I started watching Ola videos, Ola England videos, and just watching him and just the stuff that he does. I was like, okay, I didn't know this existed. I didn't know you could do this. And then I start sort of like messing about with it, and this sort of world opens up of opportunity and sound and whatnot. And in terms of amps, I mean, I've had all sorts over the years. I used to use Randalls quite a lot, but then, space kind of governed that I needed to get rid of it. So I wanted to be able to incorporate, I wanted something, and the good thing about the pods is that it's got the versatility that you can use it in a home setting. You can literally hook it up to a laptop, you can hook it up to like a small, power cab or whatever at home, but then you can also take it. And what I'm using is for live stuff, I've got it's called a Palmer Mac 402 power amp. And it's a pretty low price point. I always go for cheap shit because I never have any money, so it's like I always go for the cheap stuff and try and make it make it what I can. But it's dude, and it's so it's a good power amp. It's got dual channel, so you can have two guitars running into it, and it's you can bridge both channels, and it ends up being something like 400 watts, which is crazy.
My power amp.
Yeah, I looked at, so that's cool, man. I like that. I like the compact ones. I looked at
brilliant.
Yeah, that's not bad. I looked at the so Seymour Duncan have are they called the Power Stage?
Power Stage, yes.
They do different models of the Power Stage, but they were pretty pricey. So I was like, let's find something cheap and see if it works. But yeah, man, the it's called a Palmer, Palmer MACT MACHT 402, and it cost me about 120 quid. And
I think that was about 70. I paid for that.
Yeah, for the little ones.
And
but, I mean, you just have it in a rack.
I've barely got that past a quarter, and it's more than enough. It's surprisingly good.
Yeah, I might have to check that out. I'm always looking to sell gear and downsize, so you might turn me on to something else there. I'll blame you next time on this. Has a go at me about selling all my shit yet again. So, but yeah, I mean the setup's pretty simple, man. I'm actively writing music, which I'm going to get out there, and once it's available and once it's kind of done, obviously I'll hit you up, and hopefully you can kind of give me a bit of a shout out, because you're closer to the people that are important in the industry than I am anymore. So
absolutely, man, I can easily put it out there for you. That's not a problem.
Nice,
and obviously,
nice.
For the listeners on here on Spotify, at the end of this, there will be a nice little teaser of stuff to come through from Paul as well. So make sure you continue listening to the podcast at the end for that.
Yeah, man, absolutely. That's been an absolute pleasure, dude. It's been a long time, and I can't believe we've nearly filled 2 hours. So it's like,
Yep.
it's crazy.
I've realized, so I've got to now start the segment where I ask you the same questions that I ask all of the Spotify and YouTube guests that come on here. So the first one is your desert island rig. No money is no option. So you're taking 1 pedal, 1 amp, and 1 guitar. And what are you taking with you?
Well, you know, like I said, I kind of like modelers, but if I could take any amp, it's got to be a Mesa. It has to be. I think maybe not a triple, probably a dual rec. It's because I've always wanted to own one of those things, and I know you had Ad on last night, and that guy's had all of that stuff and still has. He's like, you know, fucking like the Don Mega of that stuff. But yeah,
I genuinely, every time I see him get new gear, I'm like, how the fuck are you affording all this?
Yeah, he's one of those guys, isn't he? He's like, one minute he's like chucking a video up playing something on a PRS, then he's got some top end Les Paul, and then this and then that. I'm like, dude, I need to know your secret. It's like, how, you know?
Yeah.
But it would have to be a dual rec. In terms of pedals, man, 1 pedal, fuck, I don't know. I really don't know. Probably with an amp like that, I just need to take a noise gate with me. I think I'd just chuck a noise gate on it. You don't need anything else, right? You just need a switch, a decent gate, just so you can get that fucking staccato shit going on without any feedback. Guitar wise, wow. That's really, really hard. That's a really, really tough question. I think, you know, and it's going to sound really boring and fucking obvious, but the fact that Metallica were the band that kind of started it all for me in terms of music, I'd have to have so Hetfield, and again, you're more of a nerd with this stuff than I am, but before Hetfield had the Black Explorer on I think on Master of Puppets, and he was using it throughout touring and probably recording of Justice. So that version of it, the MX2, yeah, I love that guitar, and that's probably why I quite like what drew me to the Jake Bowen, because it's got a very similar, you probably can't see it in this light, but it's kind of like that creamy sort of off-white color, which I loved about it. And I just, you know, I just have to have that guitar. I'd have to have it. It's a really simple rig. People would go, fuck me, is that it? But
that would be
just
nice.
It would just give you everything you want, right? That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I could die a happy man, and then I'd sell it. And then I'd get off the desert island and sell it like I do everything else and regret it. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a pretty boring but functional desert island for me. So yeah.
So next question is, what are you listening to on Spotify at the moment, or your preferred streaming music service?
I am a Spotify, bit of a Spotify whore, yeah. I'm listening to currently a lot of the band Helmet, actually, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast, very briefly. Never really listened to them through the years. It's just one of those things that came up as like a recommendation. But I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, my Spotify playlist is so unbelievably sort of all over the place. It's not like, yeah, that's quite sort of geared towards metal or whatever. I mean, I've got loads of Silverchair and Bush as well. I'm listening to a lot of Bush, if you remember the band Bush.
I've heard of the name, yeah.
Again, it's and some Pumpkins on there, Silverchair, Alice in Chains. But yeah, that kind of vibe at the moment. But there's like fucking pop music in there as well, which I'm not even going to go there because people hear it and go, I've lost all respect for you. But yeah, mainly stuff like Helmet, Alice in Chains, Bush, you know, going back to that kind of era at the moment. But that changes week in week, man. It never stays the same for very long. So yeah.
And
kind of all cool.
Last of all, if people want to find out more about you on social media, where can they find you? Even though you're a bit more of a recluse now.
I'm a bit more of a recluse now. Just, you know, like I said, I'm going to do a lot more over the next year. I've got this idea that I really, really want to have something, be it like an EP or even an album worth of music, instrumental stuff. And I'm going to be sort of putting that out there. But I mean, people can find me, just look for me. I'm pretty recognizable, just, either a hat or no hair. Hey, look, check me out. So just add me up on Facebook. And, when you play this thing at the end, dude, if people like what they hear, just fucking add me up. And if you want to get involved and do some collaboration stuff, that'd be cool, which I hope that you and I can sort of
absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah,
it would be my pleasure to do so. So Paul, thank you for spending this last hour and a half, 2 hours with me. It's been an absolute delight to have you.
It's been nice, dude, and it's been everything I expected it to be. It's some people might enjoy listening to us just rambling on and whatnot for a couple of hours, but certainly for me, it's been awesome to catch up, man. It's good to sort of talk through and sort of unpack some of the history of what I've done with music over my sort of lengthening lifetime. So yeah, it's all good, man. But thanks for the opportunity, dude.
You're absolutely welcome. YouTube listeners and watchers, make sure that you check the links in the description box below, where you can find Paul on social media. And obviously, Spotify listeners, make sure you check out the YouTube video. A like, share, subscribe, a comment is always much appreciated. Don't feel obliged to, but it really does help this podcast get the recognition and get it out there. So until the next time, I have been Josh Castle. This has been the Guitar Geeks podcast. Paul has been my wonderful guest, and we'll see you all again very soon.